Ghost Fleet, the secret doctrine. There is an air force that does not announce its missions. It does not hold press conferences after it strikes. It files no flight plans that anyone can read. For more than 7 decades, the Israeli Air Force has operated a parallel fleet, aircraft you will not find in official brochures, modified in ways the original manufacturers never intended, flying missions that governments deny until years after the fact. The pilots who flew them went to work in silence and came home to the same silence. But the evidence is in the outcomes. Reactors destroyed. Headquarters erased from the map at 2,300 kilometers range. Targets in Iran struck before Tehran even confirmed the planes were airborne. This is the story of those aircraft and the doctrine that put them in the sky. First eyes, wooden wings, and oblique cameras. We begin before the doctrine had a name. It is 1948, and Israel has been a state for days. The Egyptian Air Force is already over Tel Aviv. The Haganah's air wing, which will become the Israeli Air Force, has almost nothing to fight with. But before it could strike anything, it had to see. The de Havilland Mosquito gave Israel that ability first. Acquired from France between 1948 and 1950, the Mosquito was a twin-engine aircraft, built mostly from wood and glue, a design choice the British made during the war because aluminum was scarce. The irony was that wood made it harder to detect on the crude radar sets of the era. Israel flew it as a long-range reconnaissance bomber with a combat radius exceeding 1,600 kilometers. From Israeli soil, it could photograph or strike any capital in the region and return. Nobody expected it. Nobody could catch it at altitude. And nobody in the Arab world understood yet that Israel was building a habit, reaching further than the enemy expected, seeing what they could not hide, and hitting targets they believed were safe. The Mosquito established the principle. But principles need tools. By 1956, Israel was flying the Dassault Mystère Iva, a swept-wing French jet acquired in large numbers for the air combat role. What is less discussed is what happened before the strikes began. Modified Mystère 4 as flew pre-strike reconnaissance sorties over Egyptian positions in Sinai ahead of the Suez campaign, mapping armor concentrations and airfield layouts. The target pictures those flights produced allowed Israeli ground attack aircraft to destroy Egyptian vehicles on the ground within hours of the war opening. The lesson stuck. Never strike blind. Every major Israeli operation from that point forward began with someone going to look first. That camera went further. The Dassault Mirage 3CJ, called Shahak in Hebrew, arrived in Israel from 1962 onward. Israel received 72 aircraft. The Shahak is famous for the Six-Day War in June 1967, when Israeli pilots destroyed more than 400 Arab aircraft in 6 days, and Giora Epstein eventually accumulated 17 aerial victories flying it, the highest confirmed total of any jet pilot in history. But beyond the air combat record, the Shahak carried Israeli integrated camera pods on reconnaissance variants that flew hundreds of sorties through the Six-Day War and the grinding war of attrition that followed between 1967 and 1970. While one pilot was shooting down a MiG, another was photographing the SAM batteries that would be tomorrow's problem. Tomorrow came fast. In late 1969 and early 1970, Israel found itself in urgent need of a dedicated fast reconnaissance aircraft that could overfly the Egyptian Canal Zone without being shot down. The solution was improvised and fast. 2 F-4E Phantom airframes were pulled from the line. The gun was removed. Cameras were installed in the nose, one a Zeiss medium-altitude mapping unit, one a Fairchild low-altitude panoramic system. These two locally modified Phantoms began flying operational missions with 201 Squadron in March 1970, several months before the purpose-built Reconnaissance variant arrived from the United States. Israel did not wait for the right tool. It modified what it had. Orev, Phantom Eyes at 600 knots. The purpose-built variant did arrive. The RF-4E, designated Orev in Israeli service, meaning Raven, reached Israel in February 1971. Israel was only the second country in the world to receive it. The RF-4E was not an aircraft you flew slowly. It operated at 600 knots, which in practical terms meant that ground-based radar had perhaps 40 seconds of warning before it was already overhead and gone. The airframe carried both the Zeiss mapping camera and the Fairchild panoramic system, plus infrared sensors for night passes. The aircraft was fitted with photo flash cartridge ejectors in the aft fuselage for night missions, allowing it to illuminate a target area with a flash and capture the image in a single pass without the crew ever knowing exactly what was below them. The Orev's most consequential work was political as much as military. After the August 1970 ceasefire that ended the war of attrition, Egypt agreed to freeze its SAM batteries in place and stop moving missile systems closer to the Suez Canal. The United States brokered the agreement. Israel was supposed to trust it. Instead, RF-4E crews flew repeated sorties over the deployment zones, photographing every radar and launcher position, verifying compliance or documenting violations. The Egyptians violated the terms almost immediately. The Israeli photographs proved it. Those flights were not glamorous. They were 600-knot passes over some of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, at altitudes low enough that bird strikes were listed in mission planning as a genuine hazard. What the crews brought back shaped Israeli strike planning for the following decade, and when Egypt and Syria came across the ceasefire lines in October 1973, Israel knew exactly where the SAM batteries were. The Orev flew long after 1973. Through the 1970s and into the early 1980s, Israeli RF-4Es flew collection missions over Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia, building a regional targeting database that no satellite imagery system available at the time could replicate with the same resolution and timeliness. One specific mission profile involved flying along a border at altitude while the cameras shot obliquely into enemy territory, meaning the aircraft never had to cross the line, but the cameras captured 40 kilometers of terrain on the other side. That approach, standoff collection, without penetrating hostile airspace, became a principle Israel would apply in every generation of aircraft that followed. Atalef, the bat that watched the borders. The Yom Kippur War of October 1973 shook the Israeli Air Force in ways that are still studied in military academies. Egypt and Syria had Soviet SA-6 missile systems that the IAF had no reliable countermeasures against. In 18 days of combat, Israel lost aircraft at a rate it had never experienced. When the guns fell silent, the post-war analysis was merciless. Israel needed better intelligence, faster, continuous, and not dependent on the same jet that might be tasked for a strike mission the same afternoon. In early 1974, the IAF acquired 2 Grumman OV-1D Mohawk aircraft from the United States Army. These were the first Mohawks ever transferred to a foreign military operator. Israel called the aircraft Atalef, which means bat. The Mohawk looked strange. Twin turboprop engines, straight wings, a boxy fuselage, 3 tail fins arranged in a T configuration, and a 6-meter side-looking airborne radar antenna mounted under the belly like an enormous paddle. The cockpit held a pilot and a navigator. The aircraft was designed by Grumman for the U.S. Army in the late 1950s for exactly the role Israel now needed: persistent battlefield surveillance without tying up a combat aircraft. The OV-1D carried an oblique optical camera, an infrared sensor, and the side-looking radar, transmitting collected data in real time to a ground decoding station. It did not need to cross into hostile territory. It flew along the ceasefire lines established after October 1973, and while the cameras pointed sideways, Israeli intelligence analysts on the ground watched what Syria and Egypt were doing in near real time. Both OV-1Ds were returned to the U.S. Army in 1984 after a decade of quiet, continuous service. They left behind a lesson that shaped every Israeli ISR purchase for the next 30 years. Persistent surveillance beats brilliant single flights. That lesson needed a larger platform to reach the next level. Israel already had one in service, though most people never noticed it. Re'em, the tanker nobody writes about. The Boeing 707 is not the kind of aircraft that appears in documentaries about air power. It is a 1950s commercial airliner that the major airlines retired decades ago. But in Israeli service, stripped of its passenger seats and rebuilt from the inside out by Israel Aerospace Industries, it became the infrastructure that made everything else possible. Israel began acquiring and converting 707 airframes in the late 1970s, with the first tanker variant, designated Re'em, meaning oryx, entering IAF service in 1979. The conversion was done in Israel using Israeli engineering, a process that continued into the 2000s as additional airframes were acquired from commercial airlines and rebuilt. The Re'em was not simply a flying fuel tank. From 1983 onward, it flew aerial refueling missions that extended Israeli fighter range far beyond what any regional adversary had calculated. The 707 also carried a satellite communications suite that turned it into an airborne command and control node, providing secure beyond line-of-sight links between strike packages and command centers on the ground. In a 2024 refueling exercise simulating long-range operations toward Iran, a single KC-707 transferred a combined 41,500 pounds of fuel to an F-35I and an F-15 formation in 17 minutes, 18,500 pounds to the F-35 and 23,000 to the F-15. That exercise was not a demonstration. It was rehearsal. The Re'em had its defining moment on October 1, 1985. The mission was Operation Wooden Leg. The target was the PLO headquarters at Hammam Chat, near Tunis, Tunisia, 2,300 kilometers from Israel, the farthest combat mission the IAF had ever attempted. 8 F-15 Eagles took off from Tel Nof Air Base at 7 in the morning, each armed with GBU-15 precision-guided bombs. An hour into the flight, they rendezvoused with 2 KC-707 Ram tankers over the Mediterranean. Each F-15 took on enough fuel to bring its total load to 13.5 tons. They pressed on across North Africa at altitudes where civilian radar could not track them, following a route designed to avoid Egyptian and Libyan air defense coverage. At 11 in the morning, the formation reached the Tunisian coast. The bay was partly cloudy. The target area was clear. 6 F-15Ds delivered GBU-15 bombs against the PLO offices. 2 F-15Cs followed with unguided weapons against the ruins. The strike killed between 60 and 75 PLO operatives. No Israeli aircraft were lost. Israel did not comment officially. The tankers that made it possible were invisible in the news coverage, as they always were. A parallel fleet of 707 airframes took an even more classified path. while the RAM tankers flew missions that the IAF at least acknowledged years later. A separate batch of Boeing 707s was converted into RC-707 electronic intelligence aircraft, operated by the secretive 134 Squadron from Lod Air Base. These aircraft featured cheek antenna arrays on both sides of the fuselage, externally similar in concept to the American RC-135 reconnaissance jets. Their job was Havilland and SIGINT, intercepting and locating radar emissions and communications across the region. The precise capabilities of these aircraft remain largely classified. What is known is that they flew, and that the intelligence they produced fed targeting databases that shaped Israeli strikes for decades. The RAM fleet is now being replaced. Israel has ordered 8 KC-46 Pegasus tankers from Boeing, the same type that has been the primary U.S. Air Force refueling platform. When they arrive, one of the most important aircraft in Israeli aviation history will quietly disappear. Persistent surveillance from the ground up needed a platform that could loiter, listen, and transmit. Israel had already found one that came from an unlikely direction. Guardrail, signals from the dark. In 1985, 5 new-build aircraft arrived in Israel that most aviation databases did not list correctly for years. They were Beechcraft RC-12D airframes, based on the Super King Air Twin turboprop, converted by the United States Army's Guardrail electronic intelligence program, and then further modified with classified Israeli-specific equipment under a code word reportedly called Big Apple. They were assigned to 191 Squadron at SD Dov Air Base. Israel called them by no public name. The United States referred to the Israeli variants as FWC-12D, the FW possibly standing for field wind, a code word for whatever IAI had added inside. The RC-12 Guardrail platform was built around one core capability: passive interception and precise geolocation of electronic emissions. The aircraft could detect communication signals and non-communications radar transmissions, classify them, determine their exact origin, and transmit that data in near real time to a mobile ground processing facility. The system operated at medium altitude with line-of-sight collection ranges extending hundreds of kilometers into hostile territory. 2 or 3 aircraft flying coordinated patterns could triangulate a signal source with enough precision for targeting. No jamming, no active radar. It listened and it calculated. The target never knew it was being located. In 1991, Israel acquired 2 additional RC-12K aircraft, a more capable Guardrail variant with 1,100 horsepower PT-6 A67 turboprop engines and upgraded mission systems, expanding the fleet. Over time, Israel built its RC-12 and derivative Super King Air SIGINT force to as many as 18 airframes in various configurations, making it by a wide margin the most numerous special mission aircraft type the IAF has ever operated. While the Gulfstream jets and the F-35 get the headlines, the Beechcraft quietly circled overhead for 5 decades, building the electronic map of the entire region, identifying every radar frequency, every communication pattern, every anomaly in Syrian, Egyptian, Lebanese, and Iranian military emissions. When an Israeli strike package arrived over a target and the defenders suddenly found their radar screens blank, the Guardrail's years of collection had contributed to knowing exactly which frequencies to deny them. The Super King Air could see a lot, but it could not look everywhere at once. Israel needed something faster, with longer range, and capable of combining multiple intelligence disciplines in a single airframe. Nachshon, the eye that never blinks. In November 2001, Israel placed a classified order for 3 Gulfstream 5 business jet airframes. They were delivered green, meaning stripped of all interior, to Israel Aerospace Industries, which spent years installing an airborne integrated SIGINT system developed by IAI's ELTA division. The result was the Nachshon Shavit, meaning comet in Hebrew. The first Shavit arrived at Lod Air Base on February 17, 2006. It achieved initial operational capability within months. In the summer of 2006, Israeli and Hezbollah forces fought a 34-day war across southern Lebanon. During those 34 days, IAF aircraft flew more than 12,000 combat missions. The Shavit was airborne, listening. It had been in Israeli service for less than a year. The Shavit searches, intercepts, locates, analyzes, classifies, and monitors transmissions from air, land, and sea-based emitters simultaneously. It operates at altitudes and ranges that the RC-12 could not reach, with sensors that process a far broader spectrum. 3 aircraft were built, each capable of covering a different threat axis. Together, they gave Israel a regional signals intelligence net that operated continuously. Operators in the aircraft could task sensors, process intercepts, and push intelligence directly to strike packages while still airborne. The ground station was not always necessary. The intelligence loop closed in the air. A parallel G550 airframe was taking a different shape. In August 2003, Israel ordered a Gulfstream G550 to be converted by IAI into a conformal airborne early warning aircraft, giving it a different Hebrew name, ITOM. 2 aircraft were ordered and delivered green, then rebuilt around the IAI ELTA EL/W2085 active electronically scanned array radar system, the same family of radar technology that powers Israel's Arrow missile defense network. The ITOM carries L-band antennas embedded in both sides of the fuselage like large, flat cheeks, and S-band antennas at the nose and tail, providing 360-degree radar coverage from a platform that from the outside looks like a modified business jet. The first mission-configured ITOM was delivered to the IAF's 122nd Nachshon Squadron at Nevatim in February 2008. The second followed in May of the same year. What makes the EL/W2085 different from a conventional AWACS radar is the update rate. A traditional rotating dish antenna takes 20 to 40 seconds to sweep back to a given point in the sky. A phased array can steer its beam electronically and update every 2 to 4 seconds. In an air battle where missiles travel at Mach 3, those 18 seconds of difference can be fatal. The ITOM gave Israeli air defense commanders near real-time visibility across a volume of airspace that earlier platforms could not match, from a jet small enough to operate without the logistical footprint of a full-size AWACS aircraft. The G550 platform also has a range exceeding 12,000 kilometers and a cruising altitude above 51,000 feet, meaning it can orbit far from the threat and still look down into it. 3 platforms, 3 different intelligence disciplines, but they were still 3 separate aircraft, requiring 3 separate sorties, 3 separate crews, 3 separate maintenance cycles. The solution to that problem arrived in April 2021. On April 4, 2021, the IAF officially introduced the Nachshon Oruron, meaning light or radiance in Hebrew. The Oruron is a Gulfstream G550, modified not by a single contractor, but by a 9-year joint development program involving IAI's ELTA division, the Israeli Intelligence Directorate, the Israeli Navy, and the Defense Research and Development Directorate of the Ministry of Defense. The aircraft combines, in a single airframe and a single sortie, the capabilities of the item, the Shavit, reconnaissance aircraft from the fighter division, and advanced maritime intelligence systems that previously required a separate naval aviation platform. The deputy commander of 122 Squadron described it plainly at the delivery ceremony. We managed to condense them all onto a single flight platform. Former IAF commander Major General Amikam Norkin said the aircraft would vastly improve Israeli effectiveness. Neither statement explained what that meant in practice. What it means in practice is this. The Oruron carries an advanced AESA radar derived from the EL/W2085 but upgraded electro-optical sensors for aerial imaging, SIGINT collection systems, and maritime surveillance sensors. Its onboard computing architecture uses artificial intelligence-based automatic data extraction, analyzing and categorizing what it collects without waiting for a ground analyst. Intelligence is generated in real time, in any weather, day or night. By April 2024, the Oruron had already completed approximately 100 missions and logged hundreds of flight hours during the Gaza conflict that began in October 2023. It had been fully operational for less than 3 years, and it was already flying every day. What was orbiting overhead did not need to announce itself. Neither did what was flying below radar, penetrating denied airspace and delivering weapons before anyone on the ground knew the aircraft was there. Adir, the stealth the enemy cannot find. On December 12, 2016, 2 aircraft landed at Nevatim Air Base in the Negev Desert. They wore Israeli Air Force markings. They were F-35I Lightning IIs, designated Adir in Hebrew, meaning Mighty One. Israel was the first country outside the United States to receive the type, and the only country in the world to receive a fully customized variant with integrated domestic software, electronic warfare systems, and weapons architectures that are not present in any other nation's F-35 fleet. The negotiation to get there took years. The United States initially refused to allow Israel to integrate its own electronic warfare systems into the aircraft's core avionics. The IAF pushed back. IAF officers spent years in discussions with the Pentagon and Lockheed Martin. The eventual compromise was a plug-and-play architecture that allows Israeli electronics and an external jamming pod to be added alongside the existing American systems. No other F-35 operator in the world has that arrangement. In November 2020, a third unique F-35I arrived at Tel Nof Air Base. This was a testbed aircraft, the only example of an F-35 testbed ever delivered to any Air Force outside the United States, assigned to the Flight Test Center. Its job is to evaluate new Israeli technologies inside the American airframe, independently, without U.S. involvement in the testing cycle. Israel does not ask for permission to improve its own aircraft. The F-35I is not simply a stealth strike aircraft in Israeli service. Former IAF Chief Major General Amir Eshel said in 2017 that a single F-35 flight had gathered more intelligence than other Israeli collection systems could produce in weeks. The aircraft's AN/APG-81 AESA radar, distributed aperture system with cameras covering every direction simultaneously, and electronic warfare suite combined to make the Adir what one American analyst called an FBE-ARCE AWACS 35. A fighter, bomber, electronic warfare aircraft, reconnaissance platform, and mini AWACS in one airframe, all wrapped in low observable shaping that makes it extremely difficult to detect on conventional radar. On May 22, 2018, IAF commander Major General Amikam Norkin stood before cameras and announced that Israel had already used the F-35I in combat on 2 separate occasions, making Israel the first country in the world to conduct operational strike missions with the type. The targets were not disclosed. The locations were not disclosed. 2 days earlier, on May 10th, after Iranian forces in Syria fired rockets toward Israeli positions, the IAF used F-35Is to strike Iranian air defense infrastructure in Syria. The Adir had gone to war before most countries even declared it operational. The firsts kept accumulating. In 2021, F-35I Adirs intercepted and destroyed 2 Iranian-launched drones, the first time the type had shot down an airborne threat in combat. In 2023, an Adir intercepted a cruise missile launched by Houthi forces in Yemen, the first known instance of a stealth fighter destroying a cruise missile in combat. The aircraft had fired at nothing from stealth. The missile did not see the aircraft that killed it. In March 2026, an Israeli F-35I shot down an Iranian Yak-130 jet over Tehran, the first time an F-35 had destroyed a manned aircraft in air-to-air combat anywhere in the world. The engagement happened over the Iranian capital. The F-35I can also shed its stealth. IAF pilots call the alternative configuration Beast Mode. The aircraft carries additional weapons on external pylons, sacrificing its low observable cross-section in exchange for a payload that turns it into a heavy strike platform. When maximum firepower matters more than invisibility, the Adir adapts. No other 5th-generation aircraft in service today offers that range of configuration options to its operators. Israel has ordered 75 F-35I aircraft across 3 procurement lots, with 48 delivered as of early 2026. The stated intent is more than 100 5th-generation stealth aircraft operational by 2030, replacing all older F-16 variants. To keep those aircraft airborne on long-range missions, Israel is also acquiring 8 Boeing KC-46 Pegasus tankers to replace the retiring 707 Ram fleet. The infrastructure that made Operation Wooden Leg possible in 1985 is being rebuilt for the next generation. The distances have not changed. Iran is no closer to Israel than Tunisia was in 1985. The aircraft being prepared to reach it are considerably more capable than the 8 F-15s that crossed the Mediterranean 4 decades ago. The doctrine, from Osirak to Tehran. The operations define the doctrine better than any policy paper. On June 7, 1981, 8 F-16 Fighting Falcons covered by 6 F-15 Eagles flew at low altitude across Jordan and Saudi Arabia, maintaining radio silence, navigating by terrain features to avoid radar detection. The target was the Osirak nuclear reactor outside Baghdad. The pilots delivered their weapons in under 2 minutes. The reactor was destroyed. No Israeli aircraft were lost. It was the first military destruction of a nuclear reactor in history. The world debated the legality. Israel had already moved on to the next problem. On September 6, 2007, F-16 High Sufa and F-15I Ram aircraft executed Operation Orchard, destroying a nuclear facility under construction near Deir ez-Zor in Syria. Israel did not acknowledge the strike officially until April 2018, more than a decade after it happened. What is believed but not officially confirmed is that the night before the strike, Israeli electronic warfare aircraft, drawing on years of Guardrail and SIGINT collection data, executed a cyber and jamming operation that rendered Syria's Russian-supplied air defense radar network functionally blind during the ingress and egress. The Syrian air defense operators reportedly saw nothing. Sensor fusion, SIGINT collection, electronic warfare, and precision strike combined into a single operation that the target country could not explain publicly for years. In October 2024 and extending into 2025, Operation Rising Lion took the doctrine to its logical endpoint. More than 100 IAF aircraft, with F-35I Adirs operating in stealth mode at the tip of the spear, struck Iranian nuclear facilities and military infrastructure in a coordinated package that destroyed nearly the entirety of Iran's integrated air defense system in a single wave. UK Chief of Defense Staff Admiral Tony Radakan described it afterward. He said Israel used more than 100 aircraft, carrying fewer than 100 munitions, with no aircraft getting within 100 miles of the primary targets in the first wave, and that the operation took down nearly the entirety of Iran's air defense capability. He added that it destroyed Iran's ability to produce ballistic missiles for a year. That is the power of fifth-generation aircraft, he said, combined with exquisite targeting and extraordinary intelligence. The exquisite targeting came from 76 years of building the fleet described in this video, aircraft by aircraft, mission by mission, modification by modification. From a wooden de Havilland Mosquito photographing Arab capitals in 1948, to a stealth fighter shooting down a manned aircraft over Tehran in 2026, the line is unbroken. The Mosquito established the principle. The RF-4E refined it at 600 knots. The Mohawk proved that persistence beats brilliance. The 707 Rayam extended the reach. The RC-707 and the Guardrail built the electronic map. The Shavit and the Atom gave Israel ears and eyes that never closed. The Oruron compressed 3 disciplines into one airframe. The F-35I Adir made the strike invisible, and the KC-46, when it arrives, will keep the entire system in the air long enough to reach whatever target comes next. The doctrine has not changed in 76 years. Take the best technology available. Improve it beyond what the original designers thought possible. And when the mission requires something that does not yet exist, build it. Whatever is currently flying out of Nevatim at night is the latest version of that principle. And given the record, it is probably already on its way to somewhere nobody is expecting.